Let's get a kind of outsider's perspective on this story, because it's far from just about the BBC. Josh Doody is an author and salary coach, and he joins us from via webcam from Florida. Josh, very good to have you with us here on BBC News. Let me ask you, first of all, is there a different approach in the way that men and women generally negotiate their salaries?
I think there are kind of two answers to your question. The first is, before the negotiation begins, I find that women are more often than not inclined to accept an offer or not negotiate as hard as men are. So I think men are more aggressive in whether or not they engage to negotiate the salary or the job offer. Once they're negotiating, I think the tactics that men and women can employ to improve their compensation are basically the same.
What sort of things do you advise the people who you coach when they're approaching salary negotiations? And just before you answer that question, can you give us an idea of the range of organisations you deal with? Is it all private sector? Do you deal with some public sector organisations in the United States? In other words, some government agencies and so on?
Almost always it's private sector, larger companies that you've heard of. And I negotiate behind the scenes for them. So almost all private sector. And I tend to work with software developers and software engineers that are going to larger firms that we all interact with every day.
Got you. So I think we can assume that a lot of it then is in the new media edge of things. What then are the sort of things that the advice you offer them?
A few things. One is to try and determine before you even get a job offer, what would be appealing to you, what's your minimum salary that you would accept. Once you get that job offer, ask for some time to think it over, and then formulate your counteroffer, which I recommend between 10 and 20% for their offer. Deliver that counteroffer, and then prepare to negotiate the final details of the offer once the company responds to your counteroffer. That's it in broad strokes.
Should people be afraid of kind of pitching for a higher figure than they honestly expect to get? Or is it a bit like, you know, for those who buy property, you know, you ask for less than you're willing to pay. In this case, you ask for a lot more than you're willing to accept.
Right. I think there's very little downside there, just because it's important to remember that by the time you actually get a job offer from a company, they're very invested in bringing you on board. They want to bring you onto their team. And so when you counteroffer, in general, the worst thing that you can expect is that they'll simply say, no, we made you our best offer and we're going to stand pat. But sometimes they'll work with you and improve their offer to convince you to come on board. So their goal is to close that deal and to bring you on to their team so they can start using you in a productive capacity for their business.
Josh, anybody contacted you from the BBC yet? To ask for your advice?
Not yet. Not yet.
Josh Doody, negotiator and salary coach. Thank you very much for being with us here on BBC News. I wonder if I asked him that question again in a week's time, what answer I'd get.